to discuss the decision-making process of the dog, how it's impacted, what makes this system of training very unique and special with how it approaches this mind and body connection, and so that you are able to see or understand and gain insight into what the real standard and test is as it comes to success with creating a mutually happy and balanced relationship with your dog. Because here what I'm going to show is it always circles back to how we're connecting, how we're thinking. Dogs really do share a very deep and profound connection with us that goes beyond, goes beyond appearances, and this is going to, in this system of training, what it does is, whether you're a trainer or a dog owner, it really does fill in the final pieces. It pieces together these unanswered questions. It will show you exactly the problems and inconsistencies with other systems and why these ideas break down and fail. Because I show very clearly what people are missing is understanding, insight into this shared connection through nature. There is a connection issue here. Many trainers are missing the boat. They're focused on, they've invested in these ideas that align with behavioralism, behavioral science, and therefore they're focused on body and they're not focused on mind. And because people say, well, Dale, how do you, how can you take the kind of the mystery out of it? How is there something that we can actually physically or see with our eyes? And what I say is, through inference, these patterns and these associations, I show with the decision making of a dog. Through this, yes, you will see it. You can qualify it. You'll see it. But what you'll see is kind of like a bathtub coming, draining with water. You'll see the frequency and the elevation levels of these associated behavior issues. You'll see them diminish. You'll see them go down. But the focus here is on this connection. So here, this first diagram, you'll see this is what I drew out. This is in my, just for your information, this is in my mind and body connection, the mind and body connection book, all this information. I'm going to spend a few minutes to just kind of detail a couple of the main points here with this, so it'll help you understand it a little better. But here the diagram I put out so you could physically, you could see it. You can connect with this a little bit. Here it's the first thing is cognitive owner. Okay, how we think. Kind of picture is kind of like the nails that go into how you're thinking. Dogs really do. If you picture there's kind of two envelopes, hanging somewhere on a wall. So your thinking process is how you think. The dog is assessing those as whether it's strength and weakness. So those processes are going in. So a dog is really assessing. You can really get a sense of where your mind is going. When even before you pull, say you're putting meaningful influence over the mind, even before the leash starts to pull in one direction, the dog feels it building. Okay, and if a dog's holding a level of overall level of power in the relationship, you talk about the reaction levels of the dog's mind, which I'll show you in the other diagram here in a minute. How the mind responds to that before the leash is even fully engaged. You'll see the dog's mind start to pull back or react to that, or go into a challenge state. And that level of challenge does correspond to the overall amount of power the dog's holding within that role itself, through that interconnected, through the relationship. So that is the connection part of this, and you'll see it. Now, this is why a lot of trainers get really confused, because they, you have to start to tune into the interplay of the psychology involved, the interplay of this connection, and then start to connect the dots with how the mind responds accordingly. And then your overall goal, when you talk about impacting the decision making of the dog at that level, you have to look at what your overall goal with influencing the dog's decision making, what your how you structure training itself, like daily interactions. So you have to look at that piece of it as well, which I'll discuss here in a few minutes. So there is a little bit to this. I understand that. I mean, this isn't your typical training system, which is on appearances. My whole focus is on impacting, how the dog's decision making is impacted, because that is the real standard. That is the real test here going on. So if it's not happening, or if the dog's decision making isn't being impacted at the level that's creating, meaningful change, then something is not happening. Something the connection is not aligned the right way. How the owner's thinking, it's not changing. Those weak nails aren't coming out, so to speak. So they aren't becoming the real deal, because then you get into a situation where it's about controlling, a problem rather than fixing it. Okay, that's key, because what I show here is you can be using certain devices, interacting a certain way, but if you're not becoming the real deal, if your psychology, if your own decision-making process isn't changing at the level that's aligning more with the authoritative parenting style, if you aren't becoming a different parent, so to speak, the dog really does know it. They know whether you're becoming the real deal or not. So you could be using, say, treadmills to exercise your dog. You could be doing certain interactions with your dog, but nothing could be changing at that level that is bringing you in alignment, which is impacting the relationship at the very core. And that's important. So you could be using, say, pinch collars. You could be using certain devices that represent, say, authority, but nothing changing. That's why I'll talk about another video about remote collars. That's why sometimes what happens is the dog owner can use a remote collar, which is referred to as a shock collar, but nothing changed at that level. If their psychology isn't changing, if this connection isn't really changing, and that what will happen is there'll be a stress, put a burden of stress onto the dog. Because what happens is dogs connect dots. The dog says, well, this doesn't make sense based on, yes, I'm being, authority or meaningful influence is targeting the mind, is coming onto the mind, but the dog's saying, but the owner isn't really changing. Okay, they're still the emotional owner. They're still the friend rather than the parent, and that'll stress the dog out. It'll cause a problem with the dog. And I've helped a couple of dog owners overcome this issue. So it's just a matter of kind of getting the cash register out of the way and making sure. That's why when you see me using a leash, leashes connection, because the reason I use leashes a certain way I do, because it's the physical part of that, because it's mind and body. They're connected. They're like two trains going up and down the tracks parallel to each other. If it forces the mind over, okay, the leash is moving that way. It's direct connection, and so everything is going to connect properly. I mean, that's key. So here, the whole thing is looking at the emotional state of the dog owner. It's the ability to break apart their psychology, which I can do. I can break apart language. I can tell you that I can break apart that interplay, and then I'm starting to bring my focus onto the owner's psychology. Okay, I'm good at doing that. So how I structure training itself, it plays into that. It connects to how the person's thinking, how they're connecting with their dog, making sure they're aligning the right way through the right parental influence. So therefore, devices. That's why I get into these things about treats, motivating agents. That's why I understand trainers are all caught up in, and they're all invested, and they're all focused on devices and treats and all this. But then you have to look at, if you're focused on connection, step back and say, okay, look at the psychology involved. If a person's more emotional in how they think, because what I'm showing is this connection, this is the primary influence. Okay, this is the primary influence. So taking that into account, then you need to be focused on the interplay of that. I mean, that's what matters. Dogs are the whole, so therefore, that's why when I get involved, it's really at this level, it's an intervention. I'm going to push that stuff. I'm going to get rid of it if it's because it's going to interfere in, or it's going to promote certain psychology involved. You want to disassociate away from certain devices, certain ideas, certain interactions, certain patterns that are going to keep that tachometer, is going to get in the way of that tachometer moving over. Okay, because then it's about emotion. So too much emotions create the problem. We have to get the dog owner in alignment, for competition, the role. So therefore, certain ideas and devices, you want to get rid of them. I mean, here I know people are saying, well, Dale, what approach do I use? It's all about connection. I mean, that's why when you see me use the leash the way I do, people that are thinking a certain way are just going to look at what I do and say, oh, look, he's giving the dog a correction. Okay, you got to step back. No, it goes beyond the correction. Okay, I'm targeting the mind. I'm putting influence over the mind. I'm changing the psychology. Okay, in that correction, as you want to call it. I look at opposite. It's kind of like looking at two different perspectives coming from this connection level. One trainer could be doing that, but you have to look at, well, what am I doing? I'm more proactive in what I do because I'm a step back. I'm taking a three-dimensional view. I'm looking at my goal here. You have to look at the goal. Dog's already holding a certain level of power within the relationship. If you want to gain parental influence within that relationship, you're going to have to get off the couch, so to speak. Same as, if your child's a rebel and out of control, you're going to start to get in their pawn. I mean, that's the whole thing. So how the mind reacts to that is corresponds with the level of influence that's being held overall within the relationship. So therefore, your individual moments or interactions you have, when meaningful influence is put on over the mind, you're going to get a certain reaction, a certain level of challenge. And that's telling too. So everything plays a part here. So even the techniques and what I do and the path I take, how I work that out, the interplay of that, I'm doing it smart. I'm making sure people, even though I'm using meaningful influence, making sure people aren't getting bitten. It's all about all the techniques I use. It all comes off that interplay. So the interactions themselves, devices you use, I just stick to a flat collar and a straight leash. It's all about technique. It's all about making sure meaningful influence. So really, all I'm doing is, it's not about being aggressive with the dog. It's about being just confident, assertive, and there's a con to all this. So, I mean, the emotion out of it, okay? It's about getting to the level to truly understand how a dog's mind is influenced at that level. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down and show you the dog part of the model here. I drew two diagrams. This one's a cognitive part for dog, okay? So here when we, again, it's important to understand. We're looking at, this is the whole thing getting back to Skinner and Pavlov with nature and pack. This is a connection, okay? Dogs share a very deep and profound connection through nature, through the pack relationship. What I really encourage people to do is totally disassociate away from conditioning and these ideas about behavioral science, about learning theory. Okay, just strip those down, get rid of them. They're going to get in the way. Okay, you need to get back to just connection. Personality type of the dog owner. Because trust me, it is no accident that dog owners that are more emotional, have a more emotional bond and connection with the dogs, have the most behavior issues and problems. That's why you go back to my study. You look at, there's a gender issue there. It's clear. It's not to label people. It's about saying, well, that's interesting. We can't ignore certain things. The thing about it's right in front of our face if you want to see it. But how you think is going to get in the way of it if you're really invested. And I show that the people are actually in the work are the ones that the PhDs, the ones that are totally indoctrinated to these ideas. It's a belief system, so to speak. So for them to disengage away from these ideas is almost impossible. It's be like totally changing almost their whole way of life. But I'm telling you something. This is it. This is the answer right here, folks. People can think whatever they want. I've used this for years. It's dramatic. It's telling. You'll see results like instantly. Okay, once you start focusing in, you'll see these follower states of mind take hold. And so I have a hands-on method I use, but it blends in with this connection, with the psychology involved. But you're going to see it, guaranteed. So here's nature. It's pack. That's what it's about. It's about connection. And it's about, here again, what I was talking about, impacting the overall decision-making of the dog. The whole thing about behavior issues, dogs are the whole. What branches off from the decision-making process, you'll see the behavior issues, you'll see the intensity, you'll see the elevation levels all going up. Right from the puppy stage up through. And then you won't be able to separate, what is, say, teething and what's just part part of the dog starting to influence and power. I mean, it's a mixed bag. It's all in there. The issues about fear. A lot of trainers cannot overcome this because their framework is through weakness. I fix these problems all the time. So it's part of the dog and human connection. But here again, influence and behavior. So the type of influence, that's the other thing. When the dog's responding to the owner, you have to step back and say, okay, what's that built on? What's the foundation stone, so to speak, of that relationship? It'd just like being a parent. What type of parental influence, what level does that dog owner have? So even when you use commands, it's the grab they have over the dog's mind. It's the hold they have. If I say come, that dog, without any associations to getting something in return, parental influence, that dog should be coming in. Period. There's no, and so when you see the breakdowns, and you'll see them happen at a farther distance, and that's the whole thing, that hold will break down faster and quicker. It's dogs connect dots. So the physical is part of the mind, it's part of this connection. So influence type. I mean, this is the thing we talk about. I talk about trainers not qualifying the type of influence within their learning models. What's happening? They're not going any deeper. Okay, they're scratching the surface. They're just saying, well, if it feels good and it looks good, it must be good. That's a huge mistake. It really is. The litmus test is the decision making of the dog. I mean, you have to have the ability to break this down. It comes through experience, but it comes through really challenging this. So, and what the behavior issues are. You'll look for it and you will see diminishment of behavior as role change starts to take hold. So the whole issue here is when you're choosing what approach to use, I really strongly encourage you to start to look at this connection part of this. I mean, the personality type of the dog owner, language. There's clues here, you'll see it. Elevation levels, even when you see dog owners are trying to frame this up, they're arguing or they're using certain devices, you'll see it. You'll see why. So this is a difficult issue for people because it messes with you. I mean, it really will mess with how you think. But you have to get objective. I mean, that's the key here, is becoming objective enough to see it. So anyway, if you're interested, again, this whole model, my study comes off my book called The Mind and Body Connection, a new and profound insight in the dog and human dynamic. I created this. I mean, you see this is totally unique. You're not going to find this information, this type of insight. You're not going to find it in any other system. I developed these techniques from the ground up, this connection. Many of these techniques I use, you will not find anywhere else, period, how I approach this. So, and the depth of it. So this is very, and people can assume whatever they want. This is very deep. I try to keep it simple, but you'll see it. I mean, all this stuff, this system really does connect those final dots. So if you're interested in answers, in piecing it together through nature, you can either give me a call, email, or check out my books. They're available directly through my website. Beyond the Leash Dog Psychology Training Guide, that's my main book. It's available. The Mind and Body Connection is available also. And I have other books available as well, which you can check out. So, again, thanks very much for tuning in. Hope this has provided some insight. I hope you have a great day.